Hello everyone, I hope you all are doing great and welcome to today's video. Those who are new to my channel, a very warm welcome also to all of you. Please like, share, subscribe and hit the bell icon for getting notified for more videos that I post around EDI, MFT, cloud in general. So having said that, we're gonna go into our today's video and what I thought for next few videos that I'm going to make is around going into more detail about how an EDI X12 document looks like, right? Like most of you must be working or maybe just introduced to X12 or EDIFACT format, but they don't know much about the details of what exactly uh, ISA header or a IEA footer, let's say in an X12 document looks like. What are the information that you actually try to send through that EDI standard? So in next few sessions, what we're going to do is we're going to basically split an entire X12 document into segments. Like let's say for today's video, what we're going to do is we're going to focus on ISA header and IEA footer for an X12 document. In next section, we're going to go much more deeper into like segment level, transactions level information, right? That way, those who are new to EDI standards or maybe working in EDI or Sterling integrator for a while also, maybe they for them it might be a refresher, right? It's always good to kind of understand what each and every element consists of, what exact information it holds on, what is like different kind of separators that we have, and how should we read an XML document if it is presented in front of us, right? So with that, let's get started with today's session. And this should be a multi-part session. So today is the first one, and let me share my screen. All right, so let's get started. So as I mentioned, right, in this lesson specifically, we are going to look at the ISA header and its corresponding footer, which is IEA. And just so you know, in the next lesson, right, we'll look into the inner envelopes and also we'll look into the transaction set header and footer, right? And we'll show how they're all nested together. Now, a quick introduction of ISA or an EDI file in general. Right? So, in an EDI file, all transmission starts with the interchange control header segment and end, which is ISA, and end with a interchange control trailer segment, which is IEA. All right. Now, ISA segment is a fixed length. So, this entire like starting from this till the uh, segment separator. All right, it's entirely a fixed length and positional segment, so it is the only segment also in the entire file that has a fixed length. So and it always appears on the first line of the file. So in this slide the ISA appears broken into two lines, but that's just to fit this entire window. But typically it is a single line with a like a new line character for the next segment, right? And then between ISA and IEA, which is a footer, you have your data basically within the transactions. And so we'll talk about those in the next sessions. Now, IEA segment, which is the footer, closes the EDI interchange. So ISA and IEA is basically acting like bookends, right? Everything in the file is contained between ISA and IEA. Now, what is matching control number? So within ISA segment, there is a control number in ISA 13, which is called the interchange control number. So if you see ISA 13, it's if you calculate like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. So 126 is the control number for this transaction. All right. And then in the IEA segment, there should be a matching control number as well, which is the IEA 02. So ISA 13 should match with the IEA 02. These two numbers must match to ensure the file's integrity. All right. So now, if you, so that's what, like I mentioned, okay, that they at the bottom where as a footnote, they should match. All right. Now moving on, let's talk about some of the delimiters. Right now, there are typically, if you see over here, the last three characters in an EDI intelligence center, these are very important. So if you see over here in the ISS segment, the first line at the very end, the last three characters. So you have star, greater than, and a tilde. All right. So these three characters are actually called delimiters. Now, the term separator and delimiter means the same thing in this context. All right. Now, let's talk about the element separator. So the first delimiter is called the element separator. It separates each field or element within a segment, right? So if you see like I say 01, 02, 03, all are separated by this star. So star is acting here as an element separator, right? Now, the second one is sub-elemental separator. Okay, so this is used to separate smaller data elements inside a larger element. It is really used in practice, but many EDI transactions never, maybe also never would use this delimiter also. So in this case, I don't have an example over here to show that we are using the sub-element separator, but just to for your understanding, the second one is called the sub-element separator. Last but not the least is the segment terminator, which is the third delimiter over here, which is tilde in this case, right? It indicates the end of each segment in an EDI file. So ISA segment ends with a tilde, then followed by the next uh, element, sorry, the segment, and then that would end another with the segment, which is called separator, which is called tilde, right? So, however, it also can be a carriage return, right? A line feed or a combination of both depending upon the different um, system configuration. All right. So now let's talk about some of the rules, right? After you define the delimiters. So once you have established the three EDI delimiters, which we just spoke, the first one is the element separator, the second one is the sub element separator, which is rarely used, and last but not least, a segment terminator. So you must never use them inside a data field. So if you have a like make sure the data that you have within this ISA IEA shouldn't have this characters, because if these characters are there, then it would like basically uh, assume there is either an element separator or a segment terminator, and then the EDI file, there might be an issue with the parsing of that file. All right. So make sure that there is no, never there should be used within the data field. Now, why this matter? Because if these characters, as I mentioned, like appear inside data fields, the EDI parser will make a mistake for them, considering them as separators, and break the file structure. Okay. Now, typically for an example, I can give you, like, let's say a shipping address, right? It's a free text field, and in it maybe you might have this some of these characters appearing, right? Because people might put something like a dot or a tilde or maybe star, something like that, right? So make sure like that can occur in this kind of scenarios. A comment or note section inside the file also might contain this kind of characters, which might cause an issue with the EDI parsing. All right. Now, uh, so as I mentioned, make sure that these characters cannot appear anywhere inside the real data, such as names, addresses, or comments. Now, how to prevent this issue when you like even if like they appear, right? There's a way how you can prevent, right? So make sure like when you're importing or generating EDI data from a database, write a replace routine. All right, to scan for these special characters, see like if they appear in the data fields or anywhere in the file, and then replace them with a safe placeholder and acceptable alternative, right? Make sure that you replace them with another character so that like the parsing doesn't fail, right? So you can use replace service, something like that. So EDI has also, like, just to keep a note, has no escape character. So replacing is the only reliable method. All right. Now, let's quickly focus on the first four elements found in the ISA header segment of the EDI file. So these elements are designed to carry security related information. All right. So when I say security related information, in practice, they like in most of the EDI environments and examples, they're almost always left blank, right? So for example, here, if you see the it the ISA 01 is a 00, right? Typically, you will see like the industry norm is to overlay this with some default values, right? Instead of keeping them blank. So that's a common practice. Now, if you see the ISA 01 is 00, followed by a blank, then followed by ISA 03 as a 00, and then ISA 04 is blank, right? So now what the ISA 02 means, which is 00, which is the authorization information qualifier. ISA 03, which is typically 10 spaces. As I mentioned, it is a fixed length segment. So it is the authorization information. And then the ISA 04 is the security information qualifier. And then ISA 05 is also 10 spaces, which is security related information. Now, leaving this blank or using zeros and spaces is, as I mentioned, very common and acceptable. Most systems and trading partners will accept this. Very few use this field for actual security data. So in summary, as I mentioned, for most EDI users, don't worry about these 4 elements. Just use the standard defaults unless you know you need to customize the security handling part of it. The next 4 elements, so starting with ISA 06, all right, which is here 02, and then 07, 08, and 09, right? So let's talk about that. So these next 4 elements are grouped together. Think them as a family of sender and receiver information. This appears as 2 pairs. So ISA 05 and 06, right? That is sender information. ISA 07 and 08 are basically the receiver information, right? So first field in both of them is the qualifier. So exactly there are 2 characters. So over here in the sender, the qualifier is 02. In the receiver, the qualifier is ZZ, right? Now this tells you the type of ID that follows. For example, um, the second field in each pair is the basically the sender ID and the receiver ID, right? Now this can be any value up to 15 characters, but must be exactly 15 characters long in the file, right? Not shorter or not longer. So if your actual ID is shorter, then you have to pad it with spaces, right, on the right to reach 15 characters. So typically you would put the space at the end of it, right? So make sure it is 15 characters. Now you and a trading partner also have to decide here like which qualifiers and IDs to use. So some standard qualifier codes exist, like we'll see them in the next slide, but you can also use a user defined like a custom qualifier if like both party like sender or receiver ID, uh, receiver party agrees with that, right? So as I mentioned, ISA 0506 makes the sender qualifier and the sender ID, and receive ISA 07 and 08 consist of receiver qualifier and receiver ID. Qualifiers always 2 characters. IDs must always be 15 characters. If there is any thing which is less than 15 characters, you need to pad it with spaces on the right side, right? That's kind of the summary. Now, as I mentioned, wanted to review some of the most common ISA qualifier codes, right? So in the last one we saw like it's like 02 and ZZ. Like if you have like let's say ZZ is mutual defined, 01 is the Duns and Bradstreet number that has been assigned to them. 02 is like the SCAC, the standard carrier alpha code for motor carriers. So there are like maybe almost like 20 of them, right? I've listed just like a few of them here for you to look into in real world EDI. If it is 12, so that's like just giving an example, it's a telephone number, right? So typically what happens is that the how qualifiers and IDs work together, like in a conversation or email, someone might say 12, like which is phone number, and then followed by the number itself, right? Or maybe 01, so that means if the qualifier is 0 means the next number, there's probably sender number, which is basically the sender's dunce number itself, right? So this always, as I mentioned, comes in pairs. So the qualifier tells what kind of ID it is. That's why it is calling qualifier, and then the ID is the actual identifier value, right? So you need to agree on this format when you're setting up the trading partner relationship, right, with your trading partner. Now that we have covered the qualifiers, like now we'll move on to the next 4 ISA elements, which are not directly related to this group. Okay, all right. So after this, let's focus on these four of them which are highlighted here. Now, ISA 09 is the interchange date, so which is in the format like YYMMDD, which is 6 characters. All right. Now, purpose of this is to indicate the date the interchange was created. So the file when it was created or the interchange was created is exactly 6 character in the format as I mentioned YYMMDD, right? ISA 010 is the time stamp. So 1347 is basically HHMM, 4 characters military hours. So that defines the time stamp. ISA 0. So this 4 characters. After that, you have let's say ISA 11 over here U, which is basically the interchange standard ID or the repetition separator. All right. Now, repetition separator, what does this mean? It identifies the version, okay, of the interchange standard being used or acts as a repetition separator in newer standards. All right. So and it typically is exactly 1 character. So if let's say if you're using like let's say version 00401 or earlier, always use U in this field. For example, over here. And then ISA 12, which is the version number, interchange version number, not detailed here, but cover in the, like we'll cover in the next section more in detail, right? And then as mentioned, the key takeaways are ISA 09 and 10 always appear together as date time of interchange creation. ISA 11 is a single character, usually U for most common implementation prior to 4010 or 4020 version. If it is 5010 or other like newer version, then it might be different. And so that's kind of the benefit of all these like four elements, right? Now the next one is, let's focus on the next uh, portion of it, right? So ISA 12 is the, as I mentioned, ISA 12 is the interchange control number, right? Often called the release number. So it tells the release number. Now and it has to be like exactly 5 characters long, right? Now the ISA 0, ISA 13, right, which is the interchange control number. So it's basically a 9-digit number and usually sequentially assigned by a software. So typically what I have seen is like when there is a B2B software and it is generating or creating these EDI files, it keeps a track of the previous EDI file or X12 file that was created and what was the interchange control number of that. And then it keeps it in stored somewhere, and then it basically auto increments by 1 for the next file, right? So that's how like it typically is assigned by the software, right? ISA 14 is the acknowledgement request. Like if you're asking for acknowledgement, then it will be yes, that means it will be 1. If you're not asking for an acknowledgement, then typically it is 0. All right. ISA 15 is the usage indicator. So if it is like P, that means it is production. If it is T, that means it is test, right? ISA 16, as I mentioned, there's a separator characters. We spoke about that, element separator, sub element, right? All segment separator, all that. Okay. Last but not the least, at the very end of every file, after all transaction data has been included, you have a final segment which is called IEA segment. This is called interchange control trailer, also referred to as a footer. Now, what this IEA contains, the IEA segment contains two key numbers. The first one is the number of included functional groups or GS segments, which we will cover in our next lesson. All right. So this tells how many functional groups or GSGE, which is called GSGE pairs, are inside the interchange. So a single interchange can contain multiple functional groups. So basically, this number defines how many GSGE segments are there. So if it is 1 over here, that means you in the data section you have only one GSG segment. All right. If it is more than that, that means it has multiple GSG segments. And we'll cover them as I mentioned next lesson. The other important one is the IEA02, as I mentioned in the beginning. This should match with the control number that is out there in the ISA 13 segment. So ISA 13 segment should match with the IEA02 segment. All right. That means there's the file is like this is basically defining the file integrity part of it. All right. So I hope I think this is the last slide of my session today. Yeah. So I hope this was useful to you to just understand different elements, right, within ISA and IEA, and like trying to understand what exactly each and every element consists of, right? What kind of information we try to send. In next, as I mentioned, we'll talk about the functional group, and then we'll talk about the transaction level, like STSC as well, right? In further sessions, in next few sessions. Please like, share, subscribe, and hit the bell icon if you want to get notified for more such sessions. Please provide me comments or feedback in respect to what you want to see in future videos, and I'll try to take them into consideration when I'm planning for videos. So with that, I'll talk to you next week. Thank you. Take care.